Billionaire mother watches gas station worker help her daughter and rewards him with a gift of a lifetime. It was a freezing winter night, and the wind howled through the nearly deserted gas station. The young man behind the counter, Alex, rubbed his hands together for warmth. The heater was barely working, and his shift was dragging on. But he had no choice. He needed this job to keep a roof over his mother's head. His fingers were numb as he wiped down the counter, hoping for the night to end quickly. Just as he finished cleaning, the sound of an expensive car pulling in made him look up. A sleek black Rolls-Royce stopped at pump number 3. Alex rarely saw cars like this around here. It wasn't the kind of place where billionaires stop for gas. He straightened his uniform, ready to assist if needed. A girl stepped out of the car. She looked about 19, her coat too thin for the cold. She glanced at her phone, her eyebrows furrowed in frustration. Alex watched as she tried to figure out how to use the pump, but she was clearly struggling. Her hand shook, either from the cold or nerves, and after a few failed attempts, she sighed in frustration. Alex walked over. "Need some help?" The girl looked up, startled. Yeah. I've never done this before." He smiled. "No problem." As he explained how to pump the gas, she listened carefully, nodding. But something about her seemed off. Her face was pale, and there was a nervous energy about her. He noticed the car's tinted windows. Someone was inside, watching. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. She hesitated. I'm fine. Just in a bit of a mess tonight." Alex sensed there was more to the story, but he didn't press. "Well, at least let me help you get the gas done." She nodded gratefully, hugging her arms as the wind picked up. After he finished, she pulled out a credit card and swiped it, but the transaction was declined. Her face turned red. She tried again. Declined. Panic flickered in her eyes. She turned toward the car as if seeking help, but the person inside didn't move. Alex noticed. "Don't worry about it," he said, pulling out his own card. Before she could protest, he had already paid for the gas. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "It's cold, and you need to get home safe," he said with a shrug. Her eyes filled with something like gratitude, but also fear. "Thank you." Alex smiled. "Take care." She got back into the car, but before she drove off, she rolled the window down slightly. "What's your name?" "Alex." "Thank you, Alex." He watched as the Rolls-Royce disappeared into the night, wondering why someone driving a $1 million car had no money for gas. The next day, Alex's shift started as usual. He had almost forgotten about the strange encounter when a black car pulled up again. But this time, it wasn't the same Rolls-Royce. It was a different luxury vehicle. And the woman who stepped out was unlike anyone he had ever seen before. She was tall, elegant, and intimidatingly powerful. Her dark eyes scanned the gas station with the sharpness of a hawk. She wore a coat that probably cost more than his entire year's salary. And when she walked toward him, everyone in the station went silent. "Are you Alex?" she asked. He hesitated. "Yes." She studied him for a moment, then handed him an envelope. "My daughter told me about what you did for her last night." Alex blinked. "Oh, that was nothing really." The woman didn't smile. "It was something. Open it." His hands were shaking slightly as he took the envelope. Inside was a check. He felt his breath hitch when he saw the number. $100,000. His vision blurred for a second. I can't accept this," he stammered. The woman's expression didn't change. "You can and you will." Alex shook his head. "I didn't do it for money." For the first time, she looked at him with something that might have been approval. "I know." He looked at the check again. It was more money than he had ever seen in his life. Enough to change everything. But something told him there was more to this than just a reward. "Why was she so scared last night?" he asked cautiously. The woman's eyes darkened. "Because she ran away." Alex's stomach twisted. "From what?" A long silence stretched between them. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, "From the life I built for her." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. There was something deeper happening here, something he was now tangled in. And he wasn't sure if he wanted to know the truth. Before he could say anything else, the woman took a step closer. "This is not just about money, Alex." He swallowed. Then what is it about? She tilted her head. It's about choice. His heart pounded. What choice? A small smile touched her lips. Whether you take this gift and walk away, or whether you step into a world you can't even begin to imagine. The air felt heavy, charged with something he didn't understand. The woman turned and walked back to the car, leaving him standing there, gripping the check in his hand, knowing that his life would never be the same again. Alex stood there, the check in his trembling hand, his mind racing faster than he could keep up with. $100,000. A life-changing amount. But the woman's words echoed in his head like an unshakable whisper. Asterisk, whether you take this gift and walk away, or step into a world you can't even begin to imagine. Asterisk, what did she mean? What kind of world? He had never met anyone like her before. Everything about her screamed power, influence, and mystery. And her daughter, why had she run away? From a life of wealth and privilege? What could possibly be so terrifying about it? The cold wind bit at his skin, but he barely noticed. The black car was still parked near the gas station entrance, the woman inside waiting, as if expecting him to make a decision right then and there. His gut told him that if he walked up to that car, his life would never be the same. But could he really just take the money and pretend none of this had happened? His mother's face flashed in his mind. Their tiny apartment, the overdue bills stacked on the kitchen counter, the way she smiled at him even when she was exhausted from working double shifts. This money could fix everything. It could get her out of that place, pay off every debt they owed, even give them a fresh start. But something about it felt wrong. Like taking it meant stepping into something dangerous, something he wasn't sure he could escape from. He clenched his jaw. Maybe he was overthinking it. Maybe the woman was just grateful, and this was just her way of saying thanks. But then, why had she looked at him like that? Like she was testing him. Like she was waiting for him to see something beyond the surface. He forced himself to take a step forward. Then another. Before he knew it, he was standing at the car's window. The woman rolled it down slowly, her eyes studying him like he was a puzzle she was waiting for him to solve. You didn't walk away, she said simply. Alex swallowed hard. I need to understand what this is about. The woman's lips curved into the faintest smile, like she had expected him to say exactly that. Get in. Everything in him screamed at him not to. But something deeper, something he couldn't explain, made him open the door and slide inside. The interior of the car was pure luxury, the kind he had only ever seen in movies. The scent of expensive leather filled his nose. The woman sat beside him, calm, composed, as if she had all the time in the world. You have questions, she said. Ask them. Alex exhaled sharply. Why did your daughter run away? The woman leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. Because she wasn't ready to inherit what I built. Inherit. Alex frowned. You make it sound like she has no choice. The woman's expression didn't change. Do any of us truly have a choice, Alex? Or do we only think we do? The weight of her words pressed against him. And what exactly is she inheriting? For the first time, the woman hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. Power, she said finally. A legacy that people would kill for. A life where every move is watched, every decision has consequences, and trust is a currency more valuable than money. Alex's stomach tightened. This was bigger than he had thought. Way bigger. And you think I belong in that world? The woman turned her gaze to him, her eyes piercing through every layer of doubt he had. I think you could survive in it. And I think you might be the only one who can convince my daughter that running isn't the answer. His pulse pounded in his ears. Why me? I'm just a guy working the night shift at a gas station. A small, knowing smile touched her lips. Are you? The air inside the car suddenly felt heavier, like he had stepped into a game he didn't understand the rules to. The woman handed him a small black card. If you want answers, real answers, come to this address tomorrow night. If you don't keep the check, walk away, and forget this conversation ever happened. Alex stared at the card. There was no name, no business, just an address in a part of town he had never been to before. You're giving me a choice, he said slowly. I'm giving you a door, she corrected. Whether you walk through it is up to you. She reached for the door handle, but before she could step out, Alex asked, "What happens if I say no?" She paused. "Then you go back to your life. But something tells me you won't." With that, she stepped out, leaving Alex alone in the car, the card burning in his hand like a weight heavier than the check in his pocket. For hours, he sat in his tiny apartment, staring at both. The check could change his life. The card could pull him into something he wasn't sure he could ever escape from. But something inside him itched. A voice whispered that he had already made his decision the moment he got into that car. The next night, he found himself standing outside a massive estate, the kind that looked like it belonged to royalty. The gate opened as if expecting him, and as he stepped inside, he knew there was no turning back. Inside, chandeliers cast a golden glow over a grand hall filled with people in designer suits and glittering gowns. But the air wasn't filled with laughter or mindless chatter. It was thick with something else. Power. Influence. A game being played behind every handshake, every exchanged glance. And then he saw her, the girl from the gas station. But she wasn't the same. Gone was the frightened, lost girl he had met. She stood at the top of the grand staircase, wearing a dress that shimmered like liquid silver, her face unreadable. When her eyes met his, there was a flicker of something, shock, relief, maybe even fear. "You came," she murmured as he approached. Alex nodded. "I think I was always going to." A shadow passed over her face. "Then I hope you're ready for what comes next." Before he could ask what she meant, the room fell silent. The woman, her mother, stood at the head of the table, a glass of deep red wine in her hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said smoothly, her voice commanding the attention of everyone in the room. "Tonight, we welcome a new player into the game." Every gaze turned to Alex. Cold, calculating, measuring, his gut twisted. He had stepped through the door, and now there was no going back. The weight of every gaze in the room pressed against Alex like an unseen force, suffocating yet electrifying. He felt like a chess piece being placed on a board where the rules were unknown, the stakes higher than anything he had ever encountered. His heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to stand still, to not flinch under the scrutiny of these strangers whose power he could almost taste in the air. He wasn't sure if they were analyzing him, sizing him up, or deciding whether he was a threat or merely another pawn. The woman, the billionaire, raised her glass with the air of a queen addressing her court, her expression unreadable, yet filled with quiet authority. "Alex," she said, his name rolling off her tongue like a pronouncement rather than a greeting. "You stand here tonight because fate has brought you into our world. A world that does not welcome outsiders. A world that demands loyalty, intelligence, and the ability to see beyond the surface of things. Tell me, are you ready?" The question hit him like a bullet. Ready for what? He wanted to ask, but he knew now wasn't the time for hesitation. He could already feel the tension thickening in the room, eyes waiting for his response, some curious, some amused, and others watching with quiet calculation, as if he were a piece in a game they had been playing long before he arrived. He didn't know what was at stake, but something in him, some deep instinct, told him that showing fear now would be the worst mistake he could make. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and met the woman's gaze. "I don't know what this world is," he admitted, his voice steady, despite the storm brewing inside him. "But if I wasn't ready, I wouldn't be standing here." A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd, but the woman merely held his gaze for a moment longer, a glimmer of approval flashing in her eyes before she turned toward the others. "Then let the night begin," she declared. And just like that, the air shifted. The murmurs turned into quiet conversations, the attention on him slowly dissipating, as people resumed whatever enigmatic affairs they had been engaged in before his arrival. But he knew it wasn't over. It was just beginning. A soft voice cut through his thoughts. "That was either the bravest thing you've ever done, or the stupidest." He turned to find her standing beside him, the billionaire's daughter, the girl he had helped at the gas station. Up close, she looked even more different from a girl he had met just days ago. The fire in her eyes was back, but there was something else there now, something unreadable. "Tell me it's not both," he said, forcing a small smirk. She exhaled, shaking her head slightly. You don't understand what you just walked into. Then help me understand. She glanced around, as if checking to make sure no one was watching too closely, then grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the edge of the grand room. They slipped through a side door and suddenly, the noise and grandeur faded into the background as they stepped into a dimly lit corridor lined with oil paintings and antique vases. The shift in atmosphere was stark. The energy here was colder, quieter, as if the walls themselves carried secrets. She stopped and turned to him, her grip on his wrist still tight. You think my mother is just some billionaire who gives away money out of gratitude? She shook her head, her expression dark. She's testing you. You don't just get invited to this world. You're either useful or you're nothing. Alex frowned. Useful how? She hesitated, then whispered. You're here because she sees something in you. Something she thinks she can use. But once you're in, there's no walking away. A chill ran down his spine. Why did you run away? Her jaw tightened. And for a moment, she looked like she was debating whether to tell him the truth. Then, she took a deep breath. Because this world isn't just about wealth. It's about control, manipulation, power plays that never end. And once you're part of it, you can never be just a normal person again. Alex absorbed her words, his mind racing. He had always thought of billionaires as people who lived in luxury, detached from the problems of the real world. But this sounded different. This sounded dangerous. Then why did you come back? He asked. She let out a bitter laugh. Because no one ever truly leaves. A sudden knock echoed through the hallway, making both of them jump. The girl took a step back, her face instantly composed, her expression unreadable again. The door at the far end of the hallway creaked open, and a man in a tailored black suit stepped inside. His sharp gaze landed on Alex first, then flickered to the girl. Your mother is waiting, he said in a voice so smooth it sent a shiver down Alex's spine. You don't want to keep her guests waiting, do you? The girl's fingers twitched at her side, as if resisting the urge to clench her fists. But she nodded. Of course not. The man gave Alex a look that made it clear he was being sized up, then turned and disappeared down the hall. The girl turned back to Alex, her voice low and urgent. Whatever happens next, don't let them see fear. No matter what they say, no matter what they do. Before he could ask what she meant, she was already walking away, her posture poised, her expression cold as she stepped back into the grand hall. Alex followed, his pulse hammering in his ears. The moment they stepped back inside, the energy in the room shifted again. The billionaire woman was standing at the center of the room, and now there was something in her presence that felt heavier, more commanding. The guests had all taken their places around a long dark wood table, their eyes filled with something Alex could only describe as hunger. Take a seat, Alex, the woman said smoothly, gesturing toward the empty chair at the table. He hesitated only for a second before moving forward, his every step measured. The girl sat across from him, her eyes locked onto his, as if silently telling him to be careful. As soon as he sat, the billionaire leaned forward slightly. Tell me, Alex, she said, her voice calm, almost pleasant. What do you think makes a person powerful? The question felt like a trap. He could feel the weight of every person in the room waiting for his answer, like vultures circling prey. He took a breath. Power isn't just money, he said carefully. It's influence, control, the ability to shape the world around you. The woman's lips curved into a slow, approving smile. Interesting. And do you believe that power should belong only to those born into it? Or can it be earned? Alex knew, then, that this wasn't just conversation. This was another test. Another move in whatever game was being played here. It can be earned, he said, his voice steady. But only by those willing to fight for it. A murmur of amusement passed through the guests. The woman studied him for a long moment before finally nodding. Good, she said. Then let's see if you're willing to fight for it. Before Alex could process what she meant, the lights in the room dimmed slightly. A door at the far end of the hall opened, and two men entered. They carried a black velvet box between them, placing it carefully in front of the woman. She placed a hand on the lid, her eyes gleaming with something unreadable. Then, slowly, she opened it. The moment Alex saw what was inside, his blood ran cold. Inside the box, resting against the dark velvet, was a single silver envelope. And every person at the table seemed to be holding their breath. The woman's voice was soft, almost amused. "Welcome to the game, Alex." He had no idea what he had just stepped into. But he knew one thing for certain. There was no turning back now.